Okay. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting, December 8th, 2014. Please rise for the salute to the flag, led by, and if you, please remain standing afterwards, please. And Abington Cub Scouts Pack 41 is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're going to have two members of the community who passed away, one as recently as this morning. This moment of silence is for Woodrow Hickey, 95 years old. Woody Hickey, we know him better as, lifelong resident of Abington, who passed away on November 27th. Mr. Hickey was a proud veteran of World War II and a member of the Abington VFW. Mr. Hickey worked as a custodian for Abington High School for many years and will be deeply missed by his family and friends. This morning we were notified that a retired Abington firefighter passed away, Lester Bradbury. He was a firefighter from 1966 to 1996, 30 years. He passed away this morning. So if you please bow your heads for a couple seconds. Thank you. Be seated. One member of our board is going to be a little late, Maureen. She's at the awards banquet for the high school athletic department, and her son was on the football team, which I think Tom wants to talk about right now.
Public announcements?
Public announcements, sure.
Mr. Chairman, it's my pleasure to congratulate the 2014 state champion Abington High School Greenway football team, who completed an outstanding season with a convincing win over the Northbridge Rams in the title game at Foxborough, or I should say a rain-soaked Gillette Stadium in Foxborough this past Saturday evening. The final score was 36-6. After losing in the South Shore League title game to East Bridgewater on October 24th, the Green Wave ran the playoff table with 5 consecutive victories over Dover Sherborne, Cardinal Spellman, East Bridgewater, Bishop Fenwick, and Northbridge. Northbridge, who entered the title game undefeated with an 11-0 record, scoring an average of 44 points in the playoffs. Congratulations go out to the Greenway players who will be graduating 13 seniors this year. Head coach Jim Kelleher, offensive coordinator Ed Riley, defensive coordinator Jim Daly and their coaching staffs, cheerleader coach Kim Hicks and the Green Wave cheerleaders, and band director Charlie Blanchard and the Green Wave band. We want to thank all the businesses and families who supported the team, the fans who went to the playoff games and the state championship game at Gillette Stadium, and to the police and fire for escorting the team buses home that evening. A committee is in the process of being formed to put together a state championship banquet for sometime in early March for the presentation of the 2014 state championship rings. If any business, family, alumni would like to be a banquet sponsor, please contact Town Moderator Sean Riley or Abington High School Athletic Director Peter Serino. But quite an accomplishment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you have something else, Tom, or is that?
I've just got a couple of other little things, but the Board of Selectmen would like to thank the many businesses who purchased the street banners which adorn North Abington Center, and Glenovich Way. The blue Welcome to Abington banners were recently swapped out with the red, green, and white, red and green Hollywood banners, thanks to the efforts by the crews from the school maintenance department, the highway department, and by local volunteer resident Ron Mortimer. So you'll see those as, taking pride in Abington. The other thing I just would like to, Abington residents are reminded the installation of a new sign at the entrance of Glenovich Way is underway. Again, thank you to the 20-plus businesses and families which donated funds to the Greenway Boosters, who spearheaded this campaign to replace the older sign. The new sign will feature a digital message board with brick columns and should be completed sometime in January, weather permitting. So again, you'll see that coming up the boulevard, and that will be a nice addition to, the school property.
Excellent. Mike, you have something?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Town Moderator Sean Riley is looking for to fill 2 vacancies on a 9-member Abington Finance Committee. All members of the Finance Committee are volunteers and must be registered voters in Abington. The Finance Committee is responsible for review each annual town meeting budget and to issue recommendations to the voters of the articles to be debated at the town meeting. Interested residents should contact Sean Riley at 781-878-2668 or by calling the town manager's office. Thank you. Now, I just, as a comment, anybody that's interested in town government, the Finance Committee is just a great place. There's a lot of work involved, there's no doubt about that, but they really learn about our town, and they go over every aspect, every dollar that's spent in the town. So if you have an interest, and I hope some people do, it's a great experience that they'd come forward and join, so consider that. Thank you.
Mike, were you ever on the Finance Committee? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know the answer to the questions. You weren't?
They wouldn't let me.
So every member of this board, except for you, was on the Finance Committee. All right.
Diversity.
Diversity, yes, exactly.
I think that's why I'm the only
Financial
one.
matters.
I think that's why I'm the only one on this board that knows what they're doing.
That's why you're down the end of the table. Andy, you got something?
The Friends of Abington Seniors will be holding their annual pancake breakfast with Santa on this Saturday, December 11th, from 8 o'clock until noon at the Senior Center. If you have children and you want to have your picture taken with Santa, come by the Senior Center from 8 to noon, have pancakes, and get your picture taken.
Is that it?
Yep.
I have 2 things. An evening of holiday music, Friday, December 19th, 7 o'clock, the Abington High School, Paul K. Smith Music Room. Abington Community Band, Abington Town Choir, and the Island Grove Chorus. So it kind of admission is free, light refreshments will be served. Anybody who's seen the community band and the town choir before will know they're a treat, especially around the holiday season. Last announcement that I have is, I guess congratulations are in order. The trustees of the Abington Public Library are pleased to announce that the library has won a grant from the Federal Institute of Museum and Library Services, administered by the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. The $7,500 grant will be used over the next year for Library Sciences Everywhere project, which will bring hands-on exploration of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to the library. A series of workshops will be offered to children in the 3rd through 5th grade through a partnership with the South Shore National Science Center. You contact the children's librarian through their website or call in the library, and so congratulations to the library on that. First order of business is approval of November 24th, 2014 open session minutes.
Will they be approved?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous vote. Approval of annual license renewals. You probably saw us all signing away up here. We already signed them, even though we haven't approved them yet. Don't tell anybody. We have a list of them. I'm sure some people want to exclude themselves from some of the votes. And these licenses are pretty much most of the licenses in town for alcohol, common victualler, entertainment, automatic amusement devices, bowling alley, billiards, pool, Class 1 and 2. Remind me what Class 1 and 2 is? Is that car sales?
Used cars.
Used cars, lodging, and livery. Do we have any lodging licenses in town?
There are a couple on here.
Oh, very interesting. I should pay more attention to what I'm signing. Okay. I guess we have pages in order. The first page, does anybody want to exclude themselves from any of these things, starting with the Abington Ale House to Mia Ragazza?
Miss Haley's Garage, Mr. Chairman.
That's not on that first page, though, Mike, right?
I just put it there.
If you were on the Finance Committee, you would know that, but I think nobody needs to exclude themselves from anything from
No,
page 1?
I'd move we approve page 1, starting with Abington Ale House down through Mia Ragazza.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous vote. Page 2, starting at Old Town Cafe through, let's just do to your convenience store, and then we'll do the lodging separate if that's agreeable to the board. I'm going to exclude myself from Trukey Supermarket.
I'll make the
So-
motion.
Okay.
Approve.
All except for
All
Trukey's,
except for
right?
Trukey's?
All except for Trukey's.
Okay.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yes, sir.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I know the standard motion that is utilized
No.
is approval is contingent upon receipt of all paperwork, taxes being up to date, and inspections being in order. I just want to make sure that that's still
I think that's what Mr. Burbine said when he
I
made the
just want to
motion.
make sure.
Yeah, that's the standard.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm assuming that's all done. but if
Yes.
All right, now, do you want to do the Trukey Supermarket? one?
Yes, I have a motion to approve Trukey Supermarket.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
One abstention.
One abstention.
Lodging, four lodging houses in Abington. I'll entertain a motion to approve the licenses.
So moved?
Motion's made and
I'll second.
seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous. Livery, Best Delivery Transportation. Motion, anyone?
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous. Combined Class 1 and 2 license renewals. Why don't we just do all of these, because there's only 3 on the next page.
I
You
have
have
to
to
exclude
abstain.
myself from Borderland Service.
Okay, Borderland. Any other?
Bailey's. Just a question, when these renewals come up, are they, garages and such, are they all inspected by, like, fire, police, and
Yes.
building inspector?
So we're excluding Borderland, is that what you said?
Borderland, yeah.
Borderland and Ed Bailey's Garage? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve all of them with the exclusion of those two.
So, okay.
I'll make the motion.
Motion's made, Mike seconded.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll take up Borderland
I'll
Service.
make the motion to approve.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And one abstention. I'll entertain a motion for Eddie Bailey's Garage.
I'll make the motion.
Motion's made,
Second.
seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One abstention. Wow, that was like 100 licenses.
Yeah, of course,
Did you get
the
that
hours
last-
and hours of administrative work that goes into that is,
When did that
don't
happen?
want that lost.
That last page was included?
Yes, it was. Okay. I'm going to put off the discussion on financing of the new ladder truck. I know that Maureen was really eager to see Tom's PowerPoint presentation, so we want to hold off on that. Can we skip right to vote to authorize the proceeding of the Frollo Middle School project, any agreements with the MSBA? Mr. Town Manager, would you like to speak upon that?
Yes, sir. One of the necessary pieces of the school building project is for town council to certify the appropriate authority for executing agreements with MSBA. And in this town of Abington, it is the position of town manager. However, in consultation with Mark Rich of Copeland and Page, we determined that because of the broad policy discretion of the Board of Selectmen, that it would be best for the contracting to be approved specifically by the Board of Selectmen to authorize the town manager to contract with MSBA, only because to prevent any future delays or anything of the sort at MSBA over any questions about contracting authority. Keeping in mind that the contracting authority is really MSBA standard contracts pursuant to the votes of the town already, but still, that being as it is, it would be, I think, our recommendation is to have the board specifically vote to authorize the contracting by the town manager.
Okay. Was that the document that went down the table? Is it?
No, that's, I don't know what document went down the table, Mr. Chairman, but the, I'm sorry, when you skipped
In the
ahead, you
middle
caught
of the
me off
pack.
guard, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Okay.
And,
So is there wording for this vote, or is it just?
yes. Yes, on the memo that I provided to you on December 4th, to authorize the town manager to proceed with respect to the Frollo Middle School project and to execute necessary agreements with the MSBA.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous vote. I was going to skip down to discussion on December, next meeting, next Selectmen's meeting regarding Griffin's Dairy. I think we tried to invite all parties concerned. I know I went over the list earlier with the town manager, but do you have a list of who we invited, or do you remember?
I don't have the list in front of me. We did send it to all the town departments. We sent it to in boards and commissions. We also sent it to some of the athletic groups in town, and we asked the athletic director and also seasonal recreation director to also ensure that those recreation groups, whether they be Little League, baseball, lacrosse, whatever the case might be, were also notified. And what we notified them is the cover letter, or the memo that's in the packet here. Now, again, this is for next week's meeting, and we have asked in here, even though it's not a specific requirement that you get on a list of speakers, the chairman did discuss at least trying to get a sense of who was going to make some comments so that we could help format the meeting. As of right now, we do have 3 individuals who have requested to speak to the board at the meeting. So the meeting is scheduled for 6:30 right here. But what you have here is what we had sent out as approved by the chairman in advance. So we'll wait and see what kind of interest we have in this meeting, but
Do we want to talk about the format of that meeting? Does anybody have any concerns at all about the meeting? I just don't want it to be a horror show, you know? I mean, I think it should be pretty calm, but go ahead, Mike.
Just a couple of things. I don't know if there's any way we can, because the residents certainly have a lot of skin in this game from up and around that area, if there's any way we can notify them, or should notify them.
we can, I'm sure there's a way.
Well,
Yeah, I
sure
don't know
there's
what
a
it
way.
is, and I'm certain
Yeah,
the word of,
But one of the things that we're not making a decision that
No,
night.
but we're gathering, well, there's the question, where are we with, I know we have suggested using the Old Colony Planning Council in order to use a professional planner, but I think
Yes.
that's a wise decision. Where are they in this right
They,
now?
they are prepared to do this under their local technical assistance program, which begins on a calendar year basis, so anytime after January, they would be able to participate in doing that without us having to pay additional funds to them for a fee, pay-for-service arrangement. So Old Colony Planning Council is prepared to help us out, and as the memo that Notice put together does inform people that in order for us to do a good planning process, we need to collect information, because Old Colony Planning Council can only do as good a job as the information that's provided to them. So we're hoping this forum provides some assistance in getting information to the planning process. So we're trying to, we don't want to discourage people, but let them know this is not a night where they can expect the Board of Selectmen to take a specific vote on use, but it's an information gathering process.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good start, Kenny, and I don't know where we'd go with it. I know it's been kicked around a lot by a lot of different people, a lot of different ideas, and I think it's wise to use the Old Colony Planning Council. Any idea that they give any kind of time frame? Because I know there was a couple of youth groups that expressed an interest in using it, and, I think that is more or less what precipitated this, started this whole thing. And then, as far as youth groups go, a question I would have, and it would probably come from the Park and Rec Commission, what would Plan B be? I mean, I guess, I think they're looking at, this is the cure-all. What happens if we can't do Griffin's Dairy? What would happen to the soccer group and the lacrosse group and everybody like that? Where would we be able to provide them?
Okay. Obviously, I don't have an answer for that, but I will, before next week's meeting, try to get answers to both questions. Want a little more specificity from Old Colony Planning Council on what they would consider a planning timetable from their standpoint. And I don't know that Park and Rec has a meeting planned this week, but we can at least discuss, let the chairman know that that's something the selectmen might be looking for from them
Okay.
in the near term. So,
That's my biggest concern, too. I mean, these sports groups can tell us we need these many fields, but, I mean, how many fields are they gonna be? I mean,
Yeah.
who arranges that, you know, what kind of fields, can they all use the same size field? It's just, it's a little confusing for us to figure that out, you know?
We went there yesterday and went out there, and there are certainly some spaces, but it's a typically old farm. I mean, to get it smooth and just start mowing it, and I don't know, I'm not sure if anybody realizes, you know, the extent of repairs that would have to be done to make it really playable without having kids playing in mud and the parking and everything like that. So there's a lot to be considered, and I'm not speaking against this because I want what's right for the kids. I think we should all consider what really is possible and feasible and practical. So I'd just like to know what Plan B would be.
It would be nice that if a group came before us next Monday and said, I need this many fields, we could say, you can't get that many fields, it's just not possible. But I mean, that's something
Yeah.
we're gonna have to take under, you know, work with the Park and Rec to determine.
Right,
that,
because
I guess.
I didn't, like, youth football was here, and I really didn't realize that they played on those fields down there. You know, my heyday down there, they used to play behind the Folio. I don't know if anybody in the audience knows that now, but I was a little surprised that they want to come in, and it was a temporary thing, because I understood it, this would have been a temporary
Leather helmets.
fix to some of their problems. But anyways, we can iron all those things out.
And I plan to have the first committee's, Griffin's Dairy Committee's findings for you folks before the next meeting, so you can peruse them. Anything else? Yes.
My understanding was the Old Colony Planning Council needed some direction from us, though, as to what we wanted to do as
Right.
far as the use of that particular parcel, correct?
That is correct, because,
So we're not going to just drop it in their lap and say, you come up with a plan. They want us to come to them with, this is what we would like to do.
With
Is this
needs.
something that can be done?
sure,
Okay.
right. And what multi-use functions may be possible, given the environmental landscape, the, wetlands issues, et cetera. But they do need some sense of the needs of the community to work within.
We can give them that direction now, right? I mean, that's basically what we're going to be asking them for, isn't it?
Well, I think
Well-
that the meeting on
Purpose of the meeting.
Monday would be to see what people would like to see have done, and then I guess it's going to be up to us to come up with what we think ought to be
Right.
done.
And to Mike's point, also, to the extent that the Park and Recreation Commission would have some input and some advice as to what other alternatives might be, other than this site, if, depending on what, we don't know exactly what environmental barriers exist that could preclude, dealing with any particular need. I think that's again, that's a planning function that,
Mr. Chairman, it was provided to us over a couple of emails of some past votes that the town has taken in regards to Griffin's Dairy. I would suggest that maybe we had handouts, and certainly, I think, Mr. Burbine, you mentioned we're going to have a map that shows where the wetland delineations are.
We could have something on the screen, too. That'd be kind of neat if we can have the picture of the...
sure. And we can make handouts for the meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Did you include these? I mean, that's what you included in here, isn't it?
What's that?
Yeah, the package has some of the votes
Did you
from
look
town
at that?
meeting.
And add the
But
votes?
Mike's talking about next
No,
week.
I'm saying for the public. I
For the
think
public,
it's
for
very,
next week.
something that they can read instead
Oh,
of us
okay,
having.
yeah.
All they have the same information.
Right.
And I actually have the Finance Committee's explanation of the vote, too, that meeting night that when we
Yeah,
bought it. So
anything that
that's
would
good
be,
to have, too.
to give us some clarity on that.
Okay.
And just, I had one other thing.
Go.
If possible, could you notify, I don't know how you could do it, but I think the abutters should have some notification. Just, they obviously, like Mike said, have a stake in the game, too, and I think they ought to, if you can. I mean,
Yeah.
you're probably not going to be able to get everybody, but if you can get
Send it right out.
And just one other thing, Kenny, we might not be able, might not be able to accomplish everything we want. I think we should be prepared to have another meeting if we
Yeah.
think, if there's too much of a muddle there. Try to force everything into one meeting.
Well,
Might not be
we'll also have...
Might be, but maybe
We
not.
may have more questions to ask different groups,
Yeah.
too, so we might want to think about having a meeting where we just call in specific groups that have,
Yeah.
maybe after the Old Colony Planning Council comes up with their findings. we'll
Yeah.
have another meeting.
Right. I mean, we have termed this as, again, a needs gathering and information gathering session, question and answer type of session,
Okay.
purposes of planning.
Tom?
Get back to your original question, how do you get the most people in town notified? I mean, I don't know if, I thought this two-paragraph memo was very nicely worded. I'm not so sure if we shouldn't just distribute that to the media and see if we can get it in the Enterprise Ledger Mariner, just to let people know.
Yeah,
It's on the website, I would hope.
Yeah, well, we can contact the press.
Yeah, just so people would know there's a meeting next Monday.
Okay, sounds good. What's left? Can we skip to the,
Town manager's report?
can we do the town manager's report now? I'm putting off the financing of the ladder truck for now.
You're messing up the
I know I
rhythm
am,
of my
but,
offense here,
you know.
Mr. Chairman. I skip
That's the
skipping
advantage
around
of being
here.
chairman.
Some of the items from my written list for you, the Griffin's Dairy contract has been executed for the demolition of the house and the barn, and there is a 21-day requirement to complete the project, but that's once we have a notice to proceed, and so we have made a request and are waiting for the disconnect by National Grid, and then we should be able to move forward with the demolition. So, as always, we'll keep you informed on that. I have given you a brief update here on the budget process. So far, I did meet with the Finance Committee. We had some discussion on scheduling. There's more discussion to be had with the chairman on how we can try to set up a time-effective process, and I know we had talked about trying to perhaps do a long day, like a Saturday session, to meet with various department heads, and how to best format that to take advantage of everybody's time. And one of the things that had come up was that, boy, it's an awful lot to try to do in one day to digest a police budget or a school budget, and so it was discussed that maybe we could do a lot of the smaller budgets on one day and then have separate nights for the larger budgets, and that would still save a tremendous amount of time. I know one of the issues over the years that occurs in every community in the state is that the time commitments of the members, and to have everybody at every meeting is very difficult. So to the extent that you can maximize the participation of these volunteers is helpful. So that's still a focus here, and we'll be further defining that as we go forward. So in the meantime, it is my objective to get to all parties a preliminary budget by the middle of the month, and which again is the first step of the budget process. Unfortunately, not the last one. So, and we do have a school committee vacancy, which I know the board members are aware of. And what I am suggesting, and to best comply with the charter and give both the selectmen and the school committee the best opportunity to have a joint meeting in a timely manner, is that we actually post the vacancy next week on December 15th, and that would allow two regularly scheduled meetings that right now, the school committee and the selectmen both have a meeting scheduled within the appropriate time frame to hold the joint meeting at either one of those meetings. For planning purposes, we will presume to do that on the Board of Selectmen's meeting on January 12th, have a joint meeting with the school committee. And that's the timetable that would comply with the charter. So again, we would get that posted on December 15th. In the meantime, prior to the formal posting, good opportunity to encourage people to send their applications to the Board of Selectmen's office here if they're interested in filling that unexpired term. Actually, they would be filling it until the next regularly
That's what I was going to
scheduled
say,
election.
just so people are
next year.
aware, it would only be until April, and then
Yeah.
they'd be running in the, if they wanted to, they'd run in the election in April.
So unless there's any objections, that's what we would presume to move forward with.
I'm sure that's fine.
A couple other brief updates. We'll be distributing to you today we received the final document for the Chestnut Street, Hancock Street road safety audit. I haven't even had a chance to look through the final results, but because it just came in today, we'll get that out to you in the next day or two. And we have updated our alcohol policy pursuant to the board's actions in the past, at your last meeting. And before the end of this week, we will get you out the existing copy of our appointment process policy, and that will be on our next meeting schedule for review. Again, probably not necessarily a vote at the next selectmen's meeting, but in theory, the one after that, we should be looking at probably having a vote on that particular policy. So that's what I've got.
Okay, I'd like to wish Jonathan Myhall good luck in Vermont and thank him for his time on the school committee. I think he was a member, was it sewer commissioner before that, too? Was that something?
Park and Recreation.
Park and Rec, so thank you, Jonathan. We appreciate the help you gave the town. What do I have next? Public comment. Under public comment, I'd like to invite Jay Locicero up to the microphone, please, if you would. Jay is the pack leader of Abington Cub Scouts Pack 41, and maybe you can explain a little bit why the kids are here for tonight's meeting?
Yes, well, thanks for having us tonight. The boys here are on their way to becoming Boy Scouts, and they have to go through a number of activities to earn a certain amount of badges to qualify for becoming Boy Scouts. We're in the middle of earning our citizen activity badge, which is probably one of the longest ones. It's about 4 meetings long, 4 or 5 hours worth of work, not to mention all of the public service work that they do to earn this badge. So I'd like to invite each of the boys to stand up and say your names. Go ahead, Jake.
Joseph Locicero, Aaron Singleton, Aaron Testa.
Welcome, guys. Do you have any questions for any of us? Anything you can try to stump us on? Probably won't be that hard, Mike. No, just kidding. No questions? No, you're as bored as we are? Okay, I understand. Well, thank you guys for coming. I was in your pack for a little while, too, when I was your age, so, and I moved up to Scouts, so good luck, guys, all right? Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I guess we have to get to the inevitable. Discussion on financing the new ladder truck. Tom, you want to take it?
I can start it,
All right.
and we'll see where we go.
We also have I'm sorry to mean, we have Leo Provost and John Nuttall in the audience to answer any questions, to give us some good advice, I'm sure. So, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, the purpose of this document that I presented the board in the presentation is just to provide a framework for the board in developing a funding plan for the new aerial ladder truck that will be presented to Abington residents at the next town meeting. I feel as an individual member of the board, I feel the town manager and his financial team provided sufficient financing information at our May 2014 meeting to make an informed decision to fund the ladder truck purchase through a debt exclusion. I do feel, however, that we owe Abington residents a discussion to either reduce or completely self-finance the $1.2 million purchase price of this vehicle. So with that, Rick, could you just go to the next slide if you can?
Click on it, I think I got it now.
Going back to last June, go back to the article. Come back.
Oh, man.
It's making it look hard.
Don't show your screensaver, whatever it is.
At June 9th, I believe it was the fire chief, I think with the support of the town manager, put on the annual town warrant, Article 26, to see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds or borrow the amount of $1.2 million for the purpose of purchasing and equipping a new aerial vehicle for the fire department, to take any other action there, too. And I think, Andy, you brought up the point that this provided flexibility, but it didn't really nail at that point in time how we were going to finance the vehicle. Again, I think the treasurer, back in our May meeting, presented us information of how much various scenarios would be to go out and borrow the 1.2 over a 10, 15, and I think 20-year cycle. Now, this was approved, as I think the chief will tell you, and those that remember, it was the last article on the warrant, and it was approved by town meeting members overwhelmingly. Next slide. So, in my mind, and again, there may be more, but there's 3 basic financing options. 1 is borrow the money, 2 is what I'd call self-finance from available funds, and 3 is a combination of both. And that, chief, isn't the actual truck that you're getting. This is one I just pulled down as a sample. Okay, next. Okay, and again, I just try to boil down what I think the treasurer provided us, but this was the information in a summary format that Leo provided the board in May 2014. But in effect, we're planning to borrow $1.2 million, and over 10 years, the treasurer collector, Leo, provided us the financing cost, which were for 10 years, it was less of a financing cost of $178,200. Over 15 years, the financing cost would be $307,200, and over 20 years, the financing cost would be $516,600. So again, as you go borrow longer in time, you're going to have to pay more to finance that debt. And you can see the total financing cost of 1.3, 1.5, and 1.7. But from a property tax impact, over 10 years, that would amount approximately $25 per year additional on the tax rate. And again, I make the point below that this is a debt exclusion, so it is temporary, increase the property taxes lasting only for the duration of the loan. So under this scenario, for 10 years, it'd be approximately $25, and as I understood, the treasurer collected, that would be declining as we got out in years. Over 15 years, we reduced it to 20, and over 20 was about 18, and again, that's approximate. And again, these figures were presented at the time, and I think these were on FY 2014, average single-family home values of $281,000. So that's what was presented. We, I think as a board, Mr. Chairman, we did toss this around. The other option that was discussed was just trying to do it over 1 year. And again, I don't think the board took any action. I think, as I understood the discussion back then, the fear was to do it over 1 year. It would be about $250 for 1 year for the, the average taxpayer. And I think the feeling was that might be too risky to go and seek $250 of the taxpayers. So as I understood, and board members can comment, but it seemed like we were coming to a consensus of about 10 years if we're going to go out to finance. And some of it was 25 versus 20 or 18 didn't seem to be a big thing, but what did is the financing cost to keep those costs low. Questions?
I just want to reiterate something that I said a couple of times, and that was that I would like to personally, and I don't know the numbers or any of that sort of stuff, but I would like to maybe find out when the new school costs are going to come on, and then borrow for that time. If it's 2 years, if it's 3 years, so that it would be paid off by the time the school taxes come up, and that would kind of accomplish a ramping effect. The taxes would kind of ramp up to that. That's just my scenario. I don't even have it written down or anything like that, but, it wouldn't be as costly as a 1 year borrowing, and it also wouldn't be, I can't picture 20 years,
Right.
So that's my 2 cents worth.
Well, we'll hold that, and maybe the treasurer and collector can address that point.
If I could just, one factual input real quick. On the average single-family home, the 1 year capital exclusion was $203.87, which
Okay.
obviously is,
203?
203, right.
Thanks.
So that covered the first option is borrowing the money. So if you go to the next slide, Rick. Okay, this is, let me call it self-financing, again, a potential approach. Okay, and again, this is just an alternative presented to eliminate the need to increase property taxes to pay for the fire truck or reduce our amount to borrow. So it's either or. In my mind, it wouldn't be all, self-funding, but it may be a portion. And again, in working with the town manager and his finance team, at this point in time, I believe the stabilization fund, which for residents is sort of the rainy day account that takes care of unexpected expenses, emergency expenses, sits at $894,369. Okay. Again, working with the town manager, at the end of the budget cycle, free cash comes into the town, which basically is, as I understand it, was excess money that we didn't have to use on the spending plan of the town. This year, I believe it's close to, was it almost 800,000?
Yeah.
785,632. I believe before I got on the board, but I think this board took the measure of setting up a policy that of any free cash that came back, 60% was earmarked to go into the stabilization fund, 40% was scheduled to fund capital improvements, and 10% was OPEC.
Yeah, it was actually...
60-30-10.
Correct.
Yeah.
OPEB, right. Other post-employment benefits.
Right.
Primarily a trust fund to help, that you would put money aside to fund future, primarily health insurance costs for
Right.
retirees.
Right. So with that policy in place, that would mean 60% of the free cash that we have would be transferred into stabilization, which would be $471,380, which would leave us with an ending balance of $1.365 million in the stabilization fund, if we did nothing. Okay, what I present here is a potential scenario, which is if the aerial ladder truck purchase cost is $1.2 million, is to borrow a transfer from the stabilization fund, 44% of that is $600,000, to reduce the amount for the aerial ladder truck to $600,000. And again, the concept here is like, I think most, residents would understand. You're going to go buy a new vehicle, and you don't want to borrow the full amount, the purchase price. So you dig in a little bit to your savings account and come up with a down payment to reduce the amount to purchase, reduce your borrowing cost, reduce your monthly payment. So that's the concept here. After that, if we did that, the stabilization fund, after borrowing, would be sitting at $765,749. So again, there would be about $130,000 decrease from where we started, but we would have $765,000 in the stabilization if we did this. Now, again, these are arbitrary. These are more my thoughts, is to basically take half of it. It could be any amount. It could be zero to take from the stabilization. Questions on this?
Is the next
No questions, no.
Is the next
Okay.
is the next chapter going to be where we come up with the other $600,000?
What's that? Very good. How about if we go to the
Step
next
two.
slide? So again, if you accept the premise of borrowing money from the stabilization, then the next step would suggest working with the town manager and his finance team to develop several options for the board's consideration to make up for the remaining $600,000 balance. Ideas, some residents have suggested things, but if you look at the footnote 3, investigate other available fund opportunities, any enterprise funds that we might be able to utilize, department budgets where there might be an overage that we might be able to, encumber going into the end of the year. Do we have short-term borrowing opportunities that we might be able to borrow over 1 or 2 or 3 years to knock off the $600,000? Any cost savings opportunities, any revenue opportunities that we might see in FY 15, 16, and 17? But again, I don't really have, without working with your team, Rick, any potential, opportunities. Now, again, do we need to do this? No. You could just basically, put down a down payment to fund the aerial ladder truck at $600,000. So just go a couple more here. One thing that I just wanted to share is, this is what the average single-family property owner has paid going back to FY 2010, where in FY 2010, that tax bill for the average single-family property owner was $4,328. In FY 2011, it rose 4.3% to $45.13. In FY 2012, we saw a very a modest increase to $4,593. In 2013, it rose to $4,757, up 3.6%. Last year, again, we saw a very modest increase of 1.7% to $48.36. And this year, it just struck me that right now, based on the tax classification hearing the other night, that average single-family property owner, based on, I think it's, I shouldn't quote this, I think it's about $280,000, $290,000, will be paying $5,025. Now, FY16 and FY17 are speculative, as I put in my footnote. This assumes school borrowing, Kenny, to your point, begins in FY 2016, plus a 2.5% increase in the town of Abington spending plan. But again, to your point, when you get into 2016 or 2017 is when you're going to see the impact of the increase for, school borrowing and to fund the new school. So I just thought, again, we sort of owe it, I think, to residents to just look at, the several options ranging from borrowing it all to borrowing none or something in between. So questions?
Question, go ahead, Mike, I guess.
I agree we owe it to we also owe it to the residents to give them what is the best interest of the town and themselves. And when I was first elected to the school committee, we had zero free cash. We had very little money in the stabilization fund. And we worked our way, because we're advised to have at least 4%, I think it is, which would be a couple $1 million. And we finally got up to $1 million in the stabilization fund. We finally got, which I've hopped on, and the residents probably should listen and know, that we have a $42 million unfunded liability in pension costs to retired employees. And we started, because it was advised, a small token fund, trust fund. We started as a town to put some monies into that fund. Now, Standard & Poor's comes along and they look at us and they say, you know what? As a town, you face the reality, you find that you have some money in your stabilization fund. And you have faced the reality that you have you're looking at trying to fund these unfunded liabilities. So we're going to give you a better bond rating. And that couldn't have come at a better time, because now we're going to borrow $42 million for the school. And there's no way, shape, or form I would take money out of the stabilization fund and jeopardize that bond rating in any fashion, because I think you might try to save $1, but it's going to cost you a lot more. I just want to talk about going to town meeting. In my mind, when we did that, the chief found a serious problem, and just before town meeting. And had we wanted to, my thought, we were going to go for a debt exclusion. And we had talked about it in an open public meeting, and the reason we didn't put it in is because we would have had an election, have to form an election, so we would have had to pay for an election, which is kind of a waste of time, given the fact we were having a school vote coming and everything was coming at us at once. So we decided, or I thought we decided, to put it in front of the townspeople and explain to them, even though we had it done at this meeting, on the floor town meeting, that it was my intent anyways, to go forward as some kind of a debt exclusion, understanding that if the town at any point in time said, no, we're not going to do a debt exclusion, that this would be a fallback position. By default, would have to go to funding and out of town departments, more or less. So we got the night of town meeting, and as usual town meeting, it gets late in the evening, the fire truck comes up. It was pretty much bantered about town that everybody knew we needed a fire truck, and not one question was asked. And nor did we get up and explain to the people what our position was, even though we had talked about it here. So that went by the wayside. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about spending. This town's always been very good in recognizing what a capital expense is and what a Proposition 2.5 override expense. They always say no to the 2.5 override, and they always look to say, yes, capital expenditures, emergencies like this, we'll go for it. So I sit here and I listen to, like last winter, we wanted to put $25,000 into our snowplow account. We didn't have the $25,000. So we also know that we have some, if not all, in some very seriously underfunded departments where it's a public safety not only to the people in the town, but to the people that are working in those departments. So I really think that in my book, to inform the citizens, my best judgment of what I know of the financial condition of this town and what we should be doing, I would strongly urge this board or this town to look at going for debt exclusion. We did form a committee, we did have a meeting about it, we did talk about this at the meeting, of what our preference would be. Most people's on that committee felt that the one shot, I forget exactly what the figure was, to your point, Kenny, building up to the school vote, that they would like to have it one time, one cost. But the easiest sell and the less controversial would be to go for the 10 years. And that was the consensus of that board meeting, that $25, it would cost the residents of this town $25 for 10 years to fund the ladder truck, and it would be done. So, I mean, I appreciate the work you've done, but I just, especially on the part of the stabilization fund, Tom, I personally wouldn't buy into that. And again, I would say that the residents could well say, hey, you're full of baloney, we're going to do it. This would become our fallback position. But I would tell you, I would fight long and hard to keep it away from, taking money away from the stabilization fund, because our accountants and the accounting firms look to that as a big plus for this town, and it does affect our bond rating, and I wouldn't want to lose that. So that's it.
Andy?
I agree with Mike 100%. I think we've worked too long and too hard to get our stabilization fund up to where it is now. For the last 2 years, we've been drawing on it to run our regular operating budget, $535,000 in FY14 and $240,000 this year. And chances are, I don't know, Rick, you probably know better than I, but we're probably going to have to go back to it for a bit again this year. And I'm not sure if this is a proposal, Tom, if you're just wanting the residents to understand, another option, which I appreciate the fact that, and believe me, I want to save people on their property taxes too. But if we did follow your course, we'd have $100-something thousand less in the stabilization after that than we do now, plus a potential draw on the stabilization as a result of an operating budget or a deficit that we could potentially have for snow and ice or whatever we've been running the last 2 years. And we have a big debt obligation coming on the books. And Leo, would that be FY 2017 that we would probably borrow for the schools, or?
We need to borrow in FY 16.
FY 16.
The bulk of the first principal payment would be in FY 17.
Okay.
You probably have an interest payment
In
in 16.
16.
It would be painful with both principal and interest.
And maybe you could answer this.
Why don't you come up to the microphone if you don't mind, Leo, please?
We've built back to a AA credit rating, is that the bond
Yes,
rating?
we're AA. We used to be a AA minus.
And when did we go from AA minus to AA?
I think it was about a year ago we bumped back up to a AA. Now, probably in 2006 or 7, when we were first rated by S&P, we were a AA. Sometime after that, maybe the 2008 fiasco and 9, we dropped down to a AA minus, and now we're back at a AA.
Do you know what the,
Yeah, AA.
do you know what the interest rate, if we were borrowing, would be between a AA minus and a AA?
It's really hard to say. I mean, maybe it's an eighth, maybe it's a quarter. With a large sum of money,
A quarter
over
of
a
a
long
percent
period
is...
of time, that can add up.
That's real money then, yes. Okay, thanks.
Okay, and you're clear on when, you had a question earlier?
Well, I mean, I still like the idea of borrowing up until the school debt comes on.
Yeah.
You know, so if that's 2 years,
Let me just make this comment. This
Okay.
might be helpful. We have to pay for a fire truck beginning of April, so we do have to borrow that money. We can short-term borrow that money. Also, I saw a cash flow analysis for the schools, and they're beginning to spend big money, so around about February or March, we need to short-term borrow for a large sum of money involving the schools. When I say a large sum, I'm talking anywhere from $4 million to $6 million. So at that same time, we could short-term borrow for the fire truck and the schools. The schools, we would then convert that in FY16 to a permanent bonding of roughly $36 million or so. And at that time is when you can permanently decide, well, you need to decide ahead of time, but at that point, the ban could roll off and it could be permanently bonded along with the schools to save some bonding costs. Or, you know, depending on what you ultimately decide, we could short-term borrow a little bit longer if necessary, but then it wouldn't make sense to long-term borrow because now you'd be paying a lot more in costs. So you want to try to fit it together. When I first saw this draft, I was very intrigued by the ideas, and I looked at it closely, and I made a few notes as far as pros and cons, if I might offer those to you.
please.
The pros were that we wouldn't have any interest charges, which is a nice thing. That's if this was all paid by stabilization and short-term bonds. We would minimize interest charges, definitely. We would save on bonding charges, and there'd be no impact to the tax rate. So that was all looking pretty good. However, the cons are that it reduces our stabilization balance. It ties up free cash and may impact other capital projects for the town over the next 3 to 4 years. It reduces funding to the stabilization, and it may reduce funding to OPEB, which are all very important things too. Now, as far as the bonding charges that I thought we'd save, which was a pro, well, based on the timing, if we bonded this with the schools now, we're going to minimize that anyways. It could be a bad time to take money from stabilization, given that the state has got some budget issues. That really scared me. You know, that could be a 2008 all over again, where mid-year they decide to cut the funding.
If I could interrupt real quickly, that is in, this state budget scenario is subsequent to Tom initially putting this information out here, too.
That's right.
This is not
Yes,
something
that's
that was
true.
on the, even on the drawing board a month ago, really, or
That's right.
month and a
No, I
half
added
ago,
that one today.
In fairness to everybody, yeah.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is, if we were to pay for this from stabilization, some of it, let's say 600,000 as you suggest, and not piggyback off of bonding with the school, now you won't be able to bond this for a 10-year period, the rest, because you're under $1 million. It would be way too costly and wouldn't be feasible. So you'd have to find a way to pay for the remaining 600,000 in short-term borrowing over less than 5 years. So watch out for that. The final comment was in talking with our financial advisor about their thoughts about depleting or reducing some stabilization. They did not recommend that. They thought we should keep the stabilization balances as high as we possibly can for the bonding of the school. I think that's kind of it.
Tom?
Well, Leo, just a couple of questions.
Yep.
if we went with the 600,000, we'd be reducing the stabilization from 894,000 to 130,000 less. Okay, I guess my first question is, we're at AA now. Would that 130 less, would that affect our bond rating?
Well, it very well could. I mean, they're going to do a new bond rating when we complete an official document, official statement, which is giving them all of our financial data, and we're going to have to sit down and have a conversation with Standard & Poor's, and they're going to re-rate us at that time for this borrowing that we're going to do.
Right.
And, that's where I would prefer to see a stabilization balance that's higher than it is today, not lower. And it's also important to demonstrate to Standard & Poor's that we're following our fiscal policies at the time that we're about to borrow money. And our fiscal policies, as somebody mentioned earlier, is 60% into stabilization, 30% into capital, 10% into OPEB. So if we break that just before we go out to borrow the largest sum of money we've ever done, it could have an impact.
Who's saying break it, though?
Well, if we
There's
don't,
there's nothing in here that suggests breaking it.
well, if, well, I mean, if you put in 60% and then you immediately take out 600,000,
Okay, well, what's happening with the other 30 in
Well,
free
that's-
cash? Is
that's
that
it.
earmarked for anything?
I don't know that
Goes to
there've been those
capital plan.
discussions, but
Okay.
that's.
Is this
that's the point.
capital plan that it should go to that?
It is a capital purchase, but there's a long-term capital plan that's developed that you pick off things. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rick.
Yes, and this, as you recall, I'm sure, historically, capital items in a capital plan of some sort was presented during a fall town meeting, which we didn't have that separate fall town meeting because we deferred to the school, the town meeting that we had for the school project. So at the time of the annual town meeting, this year is when you would see the capital requests with some recommendation for applying free cash to the financing of those capital requests, which again, you would have seen it this fall had we not deferred to the town meeting specifically for the school vote. So well, we do have a capital plan, so to speak, a capital list. Of course, some would suggest a capital plan means you also have a specific recommendation for how you're going to fund that over 5 to 10 years, but like most communities of our size and ability, those are, it tends to be more of a catalog of needs, which we try to meet on a prioritized basis annually. So, and that's what you would see again this coming April or June or May, whenever we have the annual town meeting.
And just to follow up, Tom, if it was dedicated just to the capital portion of the free cash, that would only be about $240,000, because we have $785,000 in free cash. It'll be less than $240. 30% of that, $785.
But that's where we're headed now. Is
Oh,
are you
you-
going to fund capital, but if we did nothing else,
Mhm.
if we did nothing else, we're going to move, could you put that back up? How much was it that we're going to move in? 440, 80? Right now, we're going to move $471,380, whether you follow this plan or you don't follow this plan.
Going into
Stabilization.
stabilization, correct.
And you're going to bring the stabilization up to 1.365
Right, but then you
million.
gotta take 600,000
I'm saying,
out,
forget
right?
about that.
Yeah.
I'm just making the point that if we weren't going to take any out of stabilization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to take another 240 in free cash and fund capital,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So I guess my question is, if the 240 is dedicated to capital, why don't you put more into stabilization to keep it level at 894? To fund the fire
Because
truck?
again, I think Leo pointed out the fact we have fiscal policies that we have adopted, and we adopt policies for a reason, and now we're varying from the policy. And that, according to Leo, is not a
And our
good
bond
thing.
rating went up when we adopted this policy. I mean, our stabilization. Yeah.
Well, the only thing I would say, Ken, to that is, if you go back, and again, I could be wrong, Leo, but when you had an ending balance in stabilization of $1,780, I would suspect that's probably when the bond rating went down.
Right, and then we adopted this policy to bring
Okay.
it back up again.
But my question, if you look at the ups and downs of it, right? You know, has it affected the bond rating since it's always been, or over the last several years, it's been somewhere between 800 and over $1 million.
But our policy is, and I think, actually, we have a financial policy, which is one of the ones I think we need to review, but our financial policy says we should have between 5 and 15% of operating revenues outside of Chapter 78 dedicated to stabilization. To get to that number, we would have to have $1.68 million to get to 5%. We're not even, we're not there, and if we do what you're proposing, Tom, we're going to be less, we're about halfway there now, but if we do what you're proposing, we're going to be less than halfway there. We're going the wrong way here. We should be building up our stabilization fund. We really should.
But
It's
haven't
something
we in
should-
years past, didn't we take out 500,000? How much we take out for the snow?
Yeah, we did.
And what do we do the next year?
We took out 240 last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what
It's
do we
not
do?
something I was in favor of, but what do we do? And that's why I raised the question, that in all likelihood, when we cut 535 down to 240, but in all likelihood, we're going to take more out again this year. Less, hopefully, than the 240, but again, we're going to be hitting it
For
for
what?
operating budget.
For what? Give me
It was for the snow and ice
Snow.
deficit.
Yeah,
So we're assuming that we're going to be taking it out for snow and ice.
Well, it's actually for the,
I'm assuming-
it's for the budget, actually, but.
Yeah, I think,
That's right,
you know, it's a little bit difficult for any of us to the extent that there are factors we don't know and we won't know for some time. Number one, you know, what kind of a winter are we going to have? We don't know that. Is our snow over expenditure going to be 400,000? Is it going to be 700,000? We don't know that. The other thing we don't know is our state aid, local aid going to be stable? Is it going to be reduced? Is it going, you know, it's hard to believe at this point that despite some indications of an improving state economy, that local aid is going to be, we're going to see increases with right now you've got the reduction of the income tax that's going to be going into effect January 1. That's all going to impacts the state of the state. So in fairness, you know, it's difficult to make decisions when there are some big factors you don't know. And you won't know for a little bit of time yet. That's why in my memo, we did double check with the town clerk to make clear, so the board's very aware that up until she needs the ballot question 35 days before the scheduled annual town election. So if there is going to be a decision by this board to put a capital or a debt exclusion of some fashion on the ballot, it needs to be to her 35 days before the annual town election. So by early March, there really needs to be a decision, if there's going to be a decision made on this. So my concern, I'm sure everybody shares it, we do it every year with the budget process, is how much information are we going to have available when you need to make decisions? And it's a problem, and it's been a problem every year for at least for my lifetime, so I don't think that's going to change. But some of these issues may become clearer by that point in time. But it's just hard to make those decisions when there's a lot of major factors that we just don't have answers to today.
But one thing we do know is if, let's say, we go down the path of a 10-year borrowing plan, right, we do know that's going to put another $25
Yeah.
on the tax bill, which is going to bring taxes for the average single-family homeowner from 3.9% compared to last year to 4.4%, if you do the math. And then next year, based on what I'm hearing, you know, is it going to be up another 10? And I guess I question whether if you put it to a general vote of residents, do they want to pay 4.4 to support, you know, a policy that we're going to, you know, just put money in the stabilization and it's just there as the rainy day account? I'm not so sure.
But, Tom, it's there to protect our bond rating, which, in the end, it may cost the average taxpayer a heck of a lot more than the $150 or $200 or $230 or $250 it's going to cost them over 10 years to purchase this through a debt exclusion
I
for a
don't-
30-year period.
I think that's speculative, Andy, to reduce it by 130 or take 500 out and keep it where it is now. What makes you believe, if it's where it is now, that it's going to reduce the bond rating? If anything's going to reduce the bond rating, it might be going out to borrow for a new school. It's not going to be,
I'm relying on what Leo has said to us tonight regarding what affects the bond rating, and according to Leo, and I trust him implicitly, stabilization is something they look at. Following our financial policies is something these bonding agencies look at. And if we're violating the terms of our policies and reducing our stabilization account, it's not something that they're going to look on favorably, and it could, in all likelihood, cost the taxpayer more.
But I think the specific question is, at 894, if it's left where it is now, is that definitively going to affect the bond rating? Or is that, it might, or it may not, don't know.
I'm thinking, or saying that at a minimum, you want it to be where it is now, if not even a little bit higher. But I have a thought that I'll throw out to you. If you have decided that you have an appetite to borrow money for 10 years to pay for this fire truck, then you've agreed that, okay, $178,000 in interest is worthwhile. Then there's the thought that we do so, and then each year you decide how you're going to pay the principal and interest. Are you going to pay it by taking money from stabilization or the levy, or are you going to hold a ballot question on a debt exclusion? But that's almost a better, if you're resigned to agree to do 10 years, then it's better to leave stabilization high for now, borrow the money, because that's what the article was approved to do. And the rating agencies understand that for large capital acquisitions, you sometimes have to borrow money. So you'd borrow the money, and then in FY17, you'd worry about how you're going to make that principal and interest payment, which is roughly $150,000. The levy doesn't really have the room for it, but maybe at that time, you take from some free cash that you've put into the capital fund, the money to pay for that debt in that future year. Then you have to worry about it each year thereafter for 10 years, or, ask the taxpayers if they would agree to a debt exclusion. But that gives you a little leeway.
Two things. Number one, Tom, your proposal is $600,000 from the stabilization, which we've discussed. The other half still has to be paid for. And I'm not sure if there is, I can almost guarantee there's no hidden $600,000 out there that we're going to just be able to get our hands around to pay the remaining $600,000.
If there was, we wouldn't be raiding the stabilization fund the last 2 years.
And if I was hiding it, I wouldn't tell you
If we
now.
don't have it out there, then we're going to have to pull it out of operating budgets, which, and Dory, you'll remember this, back 5 years ago, we went through the same sort of thing where we thought we could borrow money previously to that 5-year period to pay for some capital items within the levy. It didn't work out because, things went haywire, and you remember this, Leo, and as a result, we went to a debt exclusion to clean up what was being paid for that way, because we just couldn't afford it within the levy. And I think that's probably going to end up what happens again somewhere down the road. I just think the prudent course is to borrow the funds either through a debt exclusion, 10 years, or a capital exclusion. And as Mike said, the default position is always to come back to your position. If the town's going to get their say, if they don't like the fact that we're going to borrow the money for 10 years or do a 1-year capital exclusion, they're going to tell us through a vote on the ballot. And if they say no, then we're going to have to figure it out this way. But I don't think this should be our first position. I just don't think that's...
Okay, I just want to react to that, Rick, because, again, if you looked at the opening options, right, it was to borrow the money, 10 years, the 1.2. The other was take money from the stabilization and then find the rest, so we self-finance it. Or the third was some combination of both. I'm not locked into $600,000. Okay, I understand. I've been through the budget process here. I understand it might not be easy, but I also believe that asking taxpayers to come up with 4.4% increase in their property taxes, I think we want to think about that. And I think you have an option that if you don't have the appetite to hit the stabilization or use free cash, which is $244, to help finance this, You think we are in an era where we're gonna be financing the schools and whatever? I don't think so, my opinion. And I think we should show some discipline to the town people that pay property taxes, that we're sensitive to it, regardless of whatever policy we have.
I'm going to take an objection to the fact that if you don't think this board is sensitive to property tax increases, Tom, you haven't been sitting here long enough, because we've taken very strong votes as far as property taxes go.
But last year,
But-
it was 1.8% property taxes went up. This year, and I'm not quite sure why, they're up 3.9%. That's a heavy-duty increase.
I agree
to
with you.
most people.
I agree
And now
with
we're
100%.
saying that we're gonna go out and borrow again, and we're gonna bring it up to 4.4, and we're gonna, put it on the property tax base for 10 years. And I'm just saying, I think there's some ground in the middle that we might not have to do that.
Okay, Chief Nuttall had his hand up a while ago. He'd like to speak, I believe. Okay. And then Rick?
Yes, please, yes.
If you make it good, Rick won't have to speak, so.
I think, first of all, my question's to the scouts. What do you guys think? Is this fun? You guys have more patience than me.
Democracy in action.
This is democracy. The problem of the ladder truck is really threefold. And one argument I was going to present at the town meeting, which there was no discussion on it, so I didn't have to or actually get the chance to do that, is I've looked at the problem of the ladder truck. It's a three-way problem at this point. We're trying to fund it. It's all risk-benefit. I think the town spoke very clearly at town meeting by voting unanimously with no question that they were willing to, they did not want to take the risk of having no ladder truck. The benefit to the community is definitely to have the aerial truck. If that had become a discussion that night at town meeting, one of the arguments I was going to counter would be if the community does not have an aerial truck, it could greatly affect the ISO rating, which is the insurance ratings for the community for each homeowner. By not having an aerial. We just went through an ISO review this year. We do them approximately every 10 years. I did a lot of work on that to try to improve the score for the ISO rating. In fact, quite frankly, I'm still waiting to hear that, to, if not improve it, which would be a reduction in the insurance rates and at least hold to where we're at. When we did that review, we did have an antique but functional ladder truck. And the ISO reviewer basically made that comment verbatim. We were close, but it worked. If we did not have a ladder truck at that point, the rates would have gone up, which the only reason I'm bringing that up now, because it's a moot point, because the town did vote for it, is pretty much to Tom's question that I think either way that we could be paying one way or the other. Ultimately, it's the board, it's the town's people that are going to decide how this truck, this apparatus is finally financed in whatever form they choose. That's your choice, that's the decision. The third risk benefit would be with trying to find how to fund this. Now, Tom came to my office a few weeks ago. He presented this. We had a good discussion on it. I said, I think it's a good idea to look at all options by all means so that you can tell the taxpayers, the residents, that you did look at all options as you're doing tonight. However, and at the time I said, the benefit to Tom's idea is, as we have heard many times tonight, you're paying it off quickly. Understood. However, I also said I think that there is a risk with that. This is only my opinion. But it's also been, as a department head and seeing the history that this community's been through in the last several years, when we did choose as a community to drastically raid the stabilization free cash fund down to almost zero back in 07, 08, 09, the hit that this community and these departments took a long time to rebuild to where we're at today. If we're looking at trying to cut into some of the department budgets to fund this vehicle, I can only speak for my department. I know the other departments, that certainly would not be popular because they're trying to survive as well. If we're looking to cut into just the fire department to try to fund this vehicle, it may be a moot point, because back in 09, the final cumulative $39,000 hit to the fire department budget closed Station 2. I don't think anybody's proposing doing that. However, not knowing where the town is at that point, to me, that's quite the risk. I don't want to see my department have to face with again to try to fund a vehicle that the community absolutely needed. So I'm not sure. I tried to clarify that. I'm not sure if that did or not, but that's just more food for thought for you.
Rick?
A couple points. First, a question to Leo. I don't think it was noted here, but that I believe in FY17, Leo, we start to drop some significant debt from the debt exclusions on the town hall and library begin to, they fall off.
We put on in the school.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying that, that the projection on property tax payments has to also realize there's an offset to debt that is falling off the books, too. That's going to offset by about a third the anticipated increase on the average family home for the school project. Is that about, I believe, well, conceptually, there's I believe, about $200,000 in fixed debt falling off from the town hall and library debt exclusions that go back what will be 20 years by FY17. Rough numbers. I don't want to put you on the spot. So again, you have to also keep in mind in this discussion that there is debt, fixed debt, that is falling off also, that is going to positively impact the tax bill. Yes, it will be made up in then some by the school vote, but that's but I think we all know that. The second thing to keep in mind is that every year, every community can put an article on a warrant, and I know they're pretty standard in a lot of communities, to see how much the town will vote to offset its tax rate. Whether it's, so it's a decision you can make depending on your budgetary condition on any given year as to whether or not you want to put what you believe may be excess funds, whether it's from free cash or any other source, to offset the tax bill. So it's, I think it's important that your financing is clear, whether it's if it's a 10-year borrowing within the limit or a debt exclusion with a specific borrowing. I think it's important to have those some clarity in your financing. But it doesn't prevent you from trying to offset a tax bill on an annual basis if that becomes a policy decision for the selectmen. Not sure that was helpful, but I just want to make sure we don't miss those points.
Okay. Mike, you had something, then Tom?
Yeah, just a couple things. I take a little bit of offense about fiscal discipline because I really think I have really tried my very best. I'm sorry it's not my town, it's our town. I'm sorry that a 26-year-old fire truck broke down. It's a safety issue. We went over all these things. I don't want to increase your taxes. But I've also worked we reduced medical benefits. We established a trash program that was contentious, that we battled for, that right now it was $1.2 million. Right now it's over $700,000. So we had a tremendous savings there. I mean, I don't want to see people's taxes, but I'm not going to say on the other side, I'm not going to increase your taxes, but I'm going to take off another firefighter or another police officer. I'm going to say, and to me, the stabilization fund is something, the state is not a good partner to us. And right now they're teetering on, we're going to go back to local aid. We're going to cut local aid. Now, to cut local aid in the middle, if we don't have anything in the stabilization fund, we have to cut right then and there. So say we had it's a very much a possibility that it could happen. With the new governor coming in, he's in a deficit right now, that we're not probably going to get local aid back to the thing. And then we get on top of that, we have to take some money to offset it because of the state messing up. And all of a sudden we get a heavy year where we get snow and ice, and we got to take another. We could deplete this in no time at all. And my fear is, and I'll say it again, that we could hurt our bond rating, and that would, anything we might try to save the taxpayer is right out the window. It's going to go, and then people are going to say, what are you guys doing? But this again is something I'd like to, I think we're in a circular argument right now, and I'd kind of like to end it. I'd like Ms. Jansen to be involved in the argument later on, because we are going to decide whether or not we have to put an article on the warrant of town meeting to what's going on the override. And this will always be the third choice. But the voters, town meeting can either decide, or the voters at the ballot can decide if they want to spend $25 a year for 10 years, or however we put it in front of them. I think that's what we're doing. I'm not willing just to eliminate the other two. I don't know where you are coming from, quite frankly. I don't know if you want to put this as the only option, the stabilization fund, or not. It sounds like you don't want to increase taxes, period.
No, I mean, but again, I think some of the wording is inflammatory in my estimation. Again, Rick, go back to what I put up there. Nobody is suggesting raiding, pillaging the stabilization. What I'm saying is it's $896,000. And by borrowing 600,000, or pick a number, let's borrow 500. We could keep it at 895. But what that is doing, it's lessening the effect on the taxpayer. As far as the purchase is concerned, my understanding is this was scheduled to be purchased in either 2016 or 2017 for $750,000. Now, that goes back a way, okay? To me, this is an emergency purchase. This is the way it was positioned. The stabilization is meant for emergency purchases. In my mind, the stabilization is meant for capital purchases like this. To Andy's point, it's not for operating expenses, right, that are recurring expenses. A capital purchase isn't a recurring expense over a long period of time. And again, when I hear, you know, we're robbing from other departments' budgets, I haven't suggested that at all. I put that up as an alternative. Is there some way that a budget is over that you can encumber the funds to help pay for this? And again, I just think that we need to be sensitive to the taxpayers, and going through this is going to at least be 4.4% on a big increase this year, 3.9. And I do appreciate we've got policies or whatever, but it's just an alternative. And from my perspective, Chief, I voted, and I believe, and I'll fight to make sure that that ladder truck gets purchased. This isn't an and/or, and if this goes down, you don't get the fire truck, because I'll support the board 100%. I'm just presenting to the board as another alternative. And again, I was alarmed by the increase this year if we did nothing of 3.9%. So I'll end it there, and, you know, I think I kind of sense where the board is, so we can move on.
You gonna let him end it, or no? You gonna-
Yeah, well,
Oh, you know,
we're not going to end it because
Andy.
we're not going to end it because we're going to have to come back and make a decision at some point in time. But
Yeah.
just, again, just so people are aware, in 2010, we had $1,700 in the stabilization account because we drew $401,000 out of it. In 2011, we drew $105,000 out of it. In 2012 and 2013, we didn't draw anything out of it, so we started to build it back. These last 2 years, we've drawn $535,000 for FY14. In this fiscal year, we drew $240,000. So for 2 years, we did great, not drawing anything. But four out of the last 6 years, we have been drawing money out of the stabilization account for regular operating budgets, not even for this. And the other point, Tom, that I go back to is, even if we borrow borrow, as you say, from the stabilization, where is that other $600,000 to pay for the truck going to come from? Is it going to come from operating budgets?
Maybe it goes out to bond, maybe it gets rolled in. I didn't really hear a clear argument on that, other than
That still
anything
has to
under $1
get-
million.
It still has to get paid for. How is
Yeah,
it going to be
but-
paid for?
But again, 600,000 versus 1.2 saves the taxpayers a little bit of money.
But how does it get paid for? It is not just free money, 600,000, we're going to borrow it. It still has to, that debt has to be paid
What I
for
heard,
in
it
some
went
way.
into the school bond.
But we're not going to, you can't borrow.
And
you can't
instead of
take-
$25 or whatever it was,
But that's still
it's
coming out.
15.
That's
Yeah,
still coming.
Yeah, I agree,
From,
but it's
it's either
less.
coming from a budget, or it's coming from something else that we're not going to be able to fund. So it's not 600,000 that's just going to miraculously appear because we're borrowing it. You still have to pay for that $600,000 worth of borrowing.
Let me just counter the stabilization, because you're absolutely right, and this board, before I go on, should compliment itself 110%. It started with less than $2,000 in stabilization in FY 2010. And through the policy that you discussed, 60 goes into stabilization of free cash, 30 goes to fund capital items in the plan, and 10% to unfunded liabilities, to Mike's point. You've increased that to over $1 million. We had a couple of bad years with the snow and ice that we had to tap into that. But the counter to that is, when you look at free cash, okay, free cash for the last 4 years has been a little over $1 million, 734, $1 million, and 785. And one thing I learned on the Finance Committee is free cash, it's not free and it's not cash. But the third thing is it's not unplanned. And I think it's showed good financial discipline that every year, the town manager and his financial team, basically, we've certified free cash to be able to fund and replenish the stabilization fund. So to me, in my mind, is it a guarantee? No. but that's a source of funds to replenish it, and after we get through this purchase, is to start building it up again, in my mind.
Well, I might agree with you at some point in time, but I just don't think right now, when we're going out to bond, as Mike said, I think it's actually $46 million, $46,217,000 in a year or so, that we should be fooling around with our policy on stabilization and reducing the
I understand
stabilization.
point.
Okay.
Can I have the last word, Mr. Chairman?
No.
Only in that, go back to my earlier comments, that probably by your first meeting in March is when this board will have to decide what, if and what question you want to put before the voters at the annual election. So that's our schedule.
All right. Thank you very much. Does anybody have anything else they want to talk about?
I would like to Mike's point.
You got to get the last word in.
No, I don't. This is totally different.
Oh,
but
okay.
The town manager did provide some information on the trash collection, and I think
Oh, that's right.
we should show the town residents how successful that program has been, because I did go back, Mike, and I looked at the former town manager's projection of what it was going to cost us after 3 years, and it's below that. It's improved, let's call it social responsibility. We recycle more as a community. The trash that we collect has been driven down, and I think, Ken, your point was always that it's an efficient, clean program in town, and I think the town residents, but I like to just
I'd like to
maybe bring
commend
that
the
forward a
residents of
little
the town
bit.
for that, too, because
Yeah.
they
It
are
makes
up
it
to town.
look a lot better.
Oh, my God, it does.
In the oversight and the effort by the Board of Health, the health agent and her staff is really, really key in keeping those recycling numbers moving in the right direction.
And if you notice, the surrounding towns, quite a few of them have gone to the same system now, too. So-
Except Rockland.
Who would have thought Abington would have been a
There's a reason
trend
for
center, huh? Does anybody have anything else? Would like to adjourn to executive session. Is that the motion that we should be making?
So moved.
For the purpose of discussing possible pending litigation.
To enter an executive session for the purpose of discussing possible pending litigation. That sounds familiar. Okay, motion made.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Roll call?
Oh, yes, okay.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay. Thank you.